Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin is a new action game spin-off of the Final Fantasy series, and here is Final Fan TV's 5-pillar review, talking about story, gameplay, visuals, audio, and lasting appeal. First, let's take a look at the story. If you're new to Final Fantasy, or you just want to skip the cutscenes and get right into the action, well, so does your main character, Jack. He wants only one thing: to kill chaos. If you're on board with that, well, let's fist bump and become best friends. But Jack finds himself in a Final Fantasy game after all, and that kind of mentality won't last too long, as almost per Final Fantasy standards, he will contend with amnesia, friendship, destiny, and godlike rulers that at some point will interrupt Jack's steadfast ambition. SOP's story is all about getting you in the front door with enticing action, entertaining and sometimes laugh out loud funny dialogue, and then shutting that door and you are now in a Final Fantasy, which for me worked out fantastic. I loved the pacing of Stranger of Paradise. The gameplay is fast and incredibly fun. Really, if I had to review this game with just one word, it would be fun. To compare it to a Soulsborne would just not be right, and yeah, we're guilty of this, not gonna lie. But there's some Souls DNA in SOP. It just never feels frustratingly difficult due to punishing you for dying. If you were to die in Stranger of Paradise, you lose your max MP that you've earned, but you'll have to pick that up at the location of death. You're familiar with this if you're a Soulsborne player, but you're not losing all of your progress. It's not punishing you for doing that, for testing out job combinations, as that is super fun, as each job offers a unique twist to the gameplay. My personal favorite combo was casting spells from a distance as a mage or a sage, and then finishing off enemies with a Zantetsuken as the breaker job class. There's a job for you to suit your playstyle, and the game encourages that kind of experimentation. The extreme difficulty may have some willing to not even willing to give it a try, but I implore that you do. The multiple difficulty options make this game accessible to anyone. The story difficulty option, honestly, it just feels like a new take on a modern Final Fantasy combat system. I prefer hard mode though. As I said, it will definitely challenge your mettle, but it will never punish you for failing. It encourages you to shake that off and try a new approach, and victory is oh so rewarding. The level design is also surprisingly very good, as I am one who enjoyed the lack of a map to guide me, as it felt great to just explore and figure it out on my own. Others may disagree here, and that is just completely justifiable. They may want a map, as the levels do tend to weave and intertwine with plenty of secrets to find, and that are they're super rewarding if you care about what's going on with the overall story. Definitely encouraged me to search high and low, around every corner, and down every path, because each lore orb I found provided some very interesting context. These bite-sized story bits are kind of essential. That can either be a good or bad thing depending on how invested you want to be with what's actually going on. With that said, outside of the levels is a simple world map with main missions and side quests to select. The side quests reuse the levels of the main missions, but with its own twist, like defeat 3 Master Tonberries or a strong enemy. They provide a good source of anima shards, items that can be used to boost job levels to fill out job trees. Playing in multiplayer co-op will award you with bonus anima shards. The inventory management, though, that is excessive and tedious. One mission could provide you with hundreds of pieces of equipment for you to sort through and dismantle. For the first half of the game, I meticulously sifted through the overabundance of items just to keep the ones that had the best job affinities and stat numbers. But the game does not make that process intuitive at all. The press this button to optimize equipment just does not feel optimal for you, because once you reach a certain threshold on the aforementioned job affinity stat, it will greatly increase certain attributes way more than if you just equip the highest level gear. Eventually, I kind of just gave up caring about all of that. and mindlessly dismantled anything lower than a certain level, which came back to bite me because I accidentally got rid of a lower level armor that actually had better stats due to the affinity. You get the idea here, I think. I actually really do love the job affinity though, and the unique abilities for each piece of gear. I think it's a brilliant system. I just wish it was handled in a more intuitive way. Now, let's talk about visuals. The visuals are bad. Like, they're really bad. I played on both PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, and they both perform with some frame rate issues, never unbearable. It never makes the game unplayable at all. They're just there, some stutters here and there, as well as what seriously looks to be 720p resolution. I'm not kidding here. Best way to describe it, it was when Witcher 3 was ported over to the Nintendo Switch. Except we never get to see what this game properly looks like in 4K on ultra powerful platforms. For the most part, all of the levels feel unique, with various biomes inspired by each numbered entry in the Final Fantasy series, like the fluorescent caves of Pravaka Seaport inspired by Final Fantasy XIV, the sunken shrines that resembles a Mako reactor from Final Fantasy VII, the snow-covered peaks of Mount Gagazat in Final Fantasy X, and so many more surprises for fans of the series. The soul burst animations, yeah, they are fun to watch, but each individual enemy type is executed the same way every time. I just wish there was more variety in how Jack disposed of his foes. I really wish the game leaned into the M rating more. The extent of blood and gore is really just the opening cutscene and some blood spatter on the characters as they battle. No blood spraying on the ground, on the floor, on the walls. Well, and those soul burst executions are violently animated, but they're covered up with what seems like red crystallized sensor bars. It's just weird that they didn't go full on with the M rating here. And this is probably not the best way to kick off the audio portion of this review, but it flows well from the last thing I said, although probably not anymore now that I added this line. I'm disappointed that the strong language wasn't prevalent throughout the game. When I heard Jack say the F word for the first time, it felt overdue considering his personality. And I'm not going to dock any points off of this review or anything like that, but I was just let down that they didn't go all in on the M rating for this Final Fantasy. Okay, now let's talk more about the voice acting. I think when we look back on memorable Final Fantasy characters, we're always going to mention Jack. Voice actor Moshian Melvin understood the assignment. He delivers Jack's lines with a great blend of angst and determination while allowing for some softer feelings to seep through that hard exterior. Jack is indeed memeable as well as memorable, but he is just plain fun to watch as he interacts with Final Fantasy things. Like, Jack doesn't give a F about your tragic past or who you are, and will straight up skip that dialogue and get right to the fighting. Whenever anyone mentions anything other than killing Chaos, he just grunts with audible frustration, and it makes me laugh every time. Neon, who just spilled her heart out, wonderfully voiced by Alejandro Reynoso, and Jack just shrugs it off and literally plays new metal music from his cell phone as he walks away. It is so campy, and I loved it. I don't think there was a moment during a cutscene that didn't have me grinning with delight. It felt refreshing for Final Fantasy, reminded me a little bit of Final Fantasy V's comedy mixed with drama. I had an issue with characters repeating their lines way too much though, and sometimes it made no sense. Like, I would emerge victorious from a battle without taking many hits, and the party would still comment about doing better next time. A win's a win. Like, what? Alright, so the soundtrack is so freaking good, and you might have heard that playing in the background of this review. Yeah, if you heard that first track, that's Merilith's battle theme, and it is so good. Lord, it's good. I loved it. So I absolutely loved hearing the each motif from classic Final Fantasy. At one point during the level grinding, I turned down all other audio levels to just really bring out the music, and it was just glorious. By the way, the new metal track is called Shadows Rising, and I will not sleep until I find out what the name of that band is, because it's my kind of music, baby. Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin will definitely make its mark as a cult classic within the fandom, because it may not be for everyone, as this is typically not what Final Fantasy fans expect. If you are new to the series and not too interested in trivial things like world building and character development, well, neither is your main character, Jack. He wants to beat the game as much as you do, and as such, this may be the best jumping on point to ease you into the deep storytelling roots of the series by giving you all the action up front. Eventually, you will find yourself invested in what turns out to be a well-written and interesting story. You'll have a blast playing it, so as long as you go in expecting a cheesy, campy, but most importantly fun story with engaging combat system that offers plenty of customization and experimentation to do it your way. From Frank Sinatra to nu metal to wonderful motifs from Final Fantasy classics that play over reimagined environments pulled from Final Fantasy classics, you'll love every moment and you'll smile at the sights and sounds of Stranger of Paradise. You'll just have to get used to those poor visual optimization regardless if you have a 4K TV or not. This thing is going to look like 720p and quite frankly, a little messy. Fingers crossed for an update that will help this game better achieve the original vision seen in concept art. With a chaos difficulty option in New Game Plus that will make co-op missions very exciting, as well as additional DLC on the way, Stranger of Paradise will remain installed for a long time to come. FFTV gives Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin an 8 out of 10. Also, just kind of want to add on here, just let me tack on a little extra thing. Major props for being a game set within a Final Fantasy backdrop with looter elements to make your characters look cool, with a multiplayer option so people can see you look cool, and not have any microtransaction BS. Big props to that. Honestly, I would put that game back up at 10 out of 10 just because of that. No, I'm just kidding. 8 out of 10. There it is. Thank you so much for watching.